Welcome back. I'm here with Ryan Malkes of Leapgen. Ryan, how you doing?
Really well, Al. How you doing today?
Doing real well. You staying warm up there in the Minneapolis area?
Oh, not really. And you can see even by the way I say, "Oh, I'm from Minnesota," but it's not. I mean, I can't. It's February. It's just that's life here. So
Yeah, that's life here. And hey, I'm really excited that you decided to come in and share because I've been a fan of what you all have been doing there as a firm and heard great things about you. And we've had some great discussions today with practitioners, with those who are actually providing solutions on employee experience. There's a role for firms to help facilitate the process, to provide these guiding frameworks, which a consensus among all presenters was that we need these mental models. We need a approach to get these formerly disparate groups aligned around employee experience, defined terms, and all that stuff. So, if you would just share a little bit about yourself and what you all are doing there at Leapgen.
yeah, for sure. Actually, if it's cool, do you want me just to pop up some slides quick?
Yeah, how about this? I'll just step away. You pop up your slides, do your thing, and I'll join you in about 15, 20 minutes. That work?
I dig it. Yep, I'll call you back.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. Perfect. Well, like Al said, that's me, Ryan Malkes. The headshots may be a little bit more flattering than me in real life today, but it's great to be here. So I'm a principal consultant at Leapgen. And for many of you, that might not mean much, but for me, it means I get to lead a team of amazing, experienced designers that they're just ridiculously passionate about creating experiences for employees because we all have been employees. We all are employees. We create solutions and experiences for people that maybe have lost a job, maybe have to let somebody go, maybe they're busy managers, maybe they're busy frontline employees or HR practitioners. And so I'm going to talk a lot about designing with empathy today, and so I'm excited to do that. A little bit about Leapgen. If you're not familiar with us, we are a digital transformation organization shaping the now of work. So what does that mean to you? Well, it means that we're a group of people that, again, are passionate about creating meaningful digital experiences for your employees because they need them and honestly, they deserve them. And so we do that through 4 different ways. So we do, very traditional consulting work, engagements, looking at strategies. We help with deployment, not implementation, not configuration. So, I don't sell a piece of technology. I don't implement a piece of technology, but we help you think through the decisions that are needed to truly make sure that you're adding value to the organization, when you should be doing things, why you should be doing things, how you communicate. With that, we do what we call ROI, so not just return on investment, but run, optimize, innovate. And that's all about ensuring that your solutions aren't Polaroids. It's not that picture that you look back and say, I looked awkward in high school. I've changed. Why hasn't the picture? We really help you change the way that your business is functioning, as well as making sure those solutions still meet the needs of your people. And then lastly, this is the area that I'm most passionate about. It's education and coaching. And so Leapgen is might not be the only firm anymore, but we were for a while. We have a flexible coaching model that's really all about meeting you where you are in your journey for transformation. However new you are to this or however experienced, it's really important for us to make sure that we recognize and honor your experiences and then be a support structure for you. So again, we can talk about Leapgen all day, but we won't. We'll talk about design today. Before we jump in, I really want to make sure that we do 3 things in the next, I probably will talk at you for about 20 or so minutes and we'll open it up for some discussion. But we're going to learn something, feel something, do something today. So we're going to learn about Leapgen's design methodology. It is in depth. It's rather pragmatic. When I do workshops around our methodology, these are 2 or 3 day events. We're going to cover it at, a lightning pace today, but we're going to cover it as best we can. What I want you to feel is excited and really support it. I'm here for you. If you are having struggles with how do we get an organization to use design thinking, how do we create meaningful solutions, I'll have a call to action at the end. I would love to connect with any or all of you. And then the last thing is do. And there's a few different things I want you to do. I want you to reach out to me, tell me how things are going, ask me questions. But I also want you to change your mindset. Start thinking about, wow, are we as an organization designing with sympathy because we feel bad and we're just throwing solutions to placate somebody? Or are we designing with empathy because we know that they need it and we're creating meaningful solutions? I'll have a little bit more of that as we go, and then we'll recap again, making sure that you learned something, hoping that you felt something, and trying to encourage you to do something. So we've been talking about digital experience, we being everybody, everywhere, for, I don't know, like 2 years pretty consistently. The last 4 years have been a little bit about experience. The last 2 years, we have talent experience platforms. We have experience layers. We have learning experience platforms. Everything has experience in there. And so there's a few of us in the chat room here. I'd love to get a feeling of how do you, so if you're watching, how do you define experience? And I'll just take a minute. I love to take a look. So if you're in the feed here, take a minute, say hi. I'll give people just a couple minutes, but I'm really interested. How would you define experience? I'll see if I get people to participate in the chat. Thank you, Al, for saying hi. If we were in person, this is where people's gaze averts, and I try to look at you in the eye, and you say, "No, not me. Don't call on me." I like that from Jess. How something makes you feel. Jackie, what is happening? What we are doing, saying, thinking. Yeah, I really like that. I like how multidimensional that is. David, everything that is happening to you. Great. As you're thinking about this might have been taxing too. Like, how do you define experiences? I have a 4-year-old daughter, and Valentine's Day is coming up, and and she asks, "So, like, what is love?" Ooh, that's a really good question. Same thing with experience, because experience oftentimes is tethered to the emotional. How do we design something that's emotional in the enterprise? Well, what we think about is 3 different things with experience. We think about the interaction, the outcome, and the sentiment. The interaction is the communication and the connection. Me talking to somebody in HR, me logging in and doing something on an Amazon app, me interacting with that app. There's outcome. What was the result or conclusion of that interaction? And then sentiment. How did it make you feel? What's your attitude towards it? And if we don't design for all 3, we end up designing for no one, because experience needs to be the summation of those 3 points. Amazon does a great job of creating a really immersive experience because they have a great interaction. Their platform works really well. My packages show up on time. I should knock on wood because I probably just jinxed myself, but my packages show up and I feel really good about my purchase most times. I can look at reviews and I can say, you know what, I do feel safe buying this because it gets 4.5 out of 5 stars and there's 10,000 reviews. And so Amazon does a good job of connecting the dots between interaction, outcome, and sentiment. It's important for us to look at these 3, though, because when we think about digital experience, and it really should just be experience. It's not even digital anymore. It's just experience. But when we think about digital, oftentimes people equate it to technology, which isn't wrong. It's just incomplete. So again, if we think about Amazon, yeah, they have a cool digital experience if you think about it through the lens of technology. But if you order something and something doesn't show up to your house, if the outcome isn't what you expected or what you needed, it doesn't matter how great their app is. It's a bad experience. Same thing with Uber. Great interface. If I was traveling, I used to use Uber quite a bit. But if the Uber driver didn't take me to the airport and took me someplace wrong, it doesn't matter how great my conversation was with him or her. It doesn't matter if the app was easy to use to summon the Uber. If I don't get to where I'm going, it's a bad experience. So how do we create those experiences that focus on interaction, outcome, and really that sentiment, that feeling? Well, we can use design thinking. And so design thinking is a methodology, and it's still kind of buzzwordy today. We hear design thinking all the time. But design thinking is not just a pragmatic approach to design. So there's, agile, big A, agile, lean, Six Sigma, waterfall, all of those different methods of doing something, creating something, working towards something. Design thinking is like that. What I really like about design thinking is not only is it a method, but it's a mindset. It's the understanding that we're doing this for our people with empathy as a foundation. And so the way Leapgen approaches design thinking, we've added a few different steps. And so when you think of design thinking, if you look it up and you find something from Stanford's D School, who is really one of the pioneering schools or practices around design thinking. They had empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. Those were the 5 core phases or milestones of design thinking. And so we embrace those and we use those within enterprises. And we found that when you design a thing like a pen or a phone, the design thinking process works really, really well. But when we design a thing which is a service or an experience like onboarding, there was a few other things that we needed to think about, because now it wasn't just for one consumer. There could have been multiple consumers of that experience. There's multiple producers or facilitators. And so we've added in a few steps. And then really, again, like Al said, that visual model, that mental model, we decided to bucket them into learn, innovate, and deliver to help us and our clients truly understand what it is that we're doing in each milestone. And so I'm going to take the next, I'm looking at my clock, 15 or so minutes, and we'll talk through what are we doing in learn, what are we doing in innovate, what are we doing in deliver. So let's jump in. When we talk about learn is all about empathizing with our people, learning about them. I mentioned just a moment ago the difference really between, are we creating solutions to placate our employees because we're sympathetic, we feel bad? Or are we designing something meaningful because we can put ourselves in their shoes? And as a former HR light practitioner, HR has been really good at kind of sympathizing, feeling bad, still being emotional about things, right? But feeling bad for someone. Where we need to develop the skill is around empathy. And empathy, though it feels like it should be inherent, everybody should have empathy, and I think everybody does, it is a skill that needs to be practiced, developed, just like a muscle needs to be exercised. And so this first stage, this learn stage, is all about being able to interact with our fellow employees, understand a little bit more about what they're going through, and truly being able to empathize so that when we create solutions, we're creating solutions for them, kind of by them, rather for them, for us. So we have conversations with our employees, and there's a bunch of different ways you can do that. This goes into this listening strategy concept that we won't dig into today, but there's a lot of different ways that we can interact. We can have focus groups. I've been doing this work for a while now, and we used to kind of do job shadowing. Like, let's actually go and live a day in the life of one of our employees and see what it's like to interact with people, the technology, ask questions, and experience the organization from their perspective. Makes it a little bit more difficult today with everything that's going on. But ultimately, the process is about mining data. Not unpersonalized or not meaningful or unemotional data, but really truly mining data to learn more about our people. And so here's an example of one of those outputs. We mine the data, and then what do we get from it? Well, we get a snapshot of who our people are, both from a operational perspective, but in this case with Naya, this is a behavioral persona. So we were looking at, what types of personalities exist within a career growth and development framework. And there was Naya. She was the upward and onward employee. She engaged in learning and development, career opportunities, stretch assignments, performance management processes through the lens of really trying to climb the corporate ladder. And so through empathizing with her, we understood a little bit more, not only what she was doing and what she was interested in, but why she was doing it, why it was important to her, and how we could better serve her. Another step of the empathize process is journey mapping. So here's Grace. And we're sitting down with Grace and talking to her about her onboarding experience. And she's new to this organization. And there were some things that were really exciting and went really well. There was other things that weren't exciting and didn't go well. The great thing about a journey map is it helps us identify the moments that matter and then give us the opportunity to make sure that they do. They also make sure that, or allow us to identify the moments that shouldn't matter and make sure that they don't. Sometimes on a journey map, this is not a process map. These aren't all the things that are happening through the organization. These are what's happening for Grace. This is her perception, her emotion, her experience. And we could see things on here that were memorable to her, that we say, I don't know if I want her remembering that. Should someone remember filling out paperwork? No, probably not. If they did, is that an issue? And the power of this work allows us to identify unique differences within our population. So yeah, we'll have these different personas and their different journeys, and we can understand a little bit about how they're unique, and that is beautiful. But really, when it comes to designing inclusive solutions, finding out how they're similar can be really rewarding. And so here's an example of the 3 personas we created in that prior scenario of career growth and development. We had Marie becoming the best. We had Naya, the upward and onward. And then we had Amina still figuring it out. And at the bottom there, you can see on the left, there's scalability. These group needs allow us to create really meaningful solutions at scale, deliver an amazing amount of value to a wide range of people across the organization. It's really tempting for designers such as myself to say, let's create these group needs. Let's solve for these group needs first. But one of the themes of today's conversation across the entire day was using data to make informed decisions, using data to turn it into information into meaningful insights, and then taking insights and doing things. And so with this organization, we took a look and said, well, what was the impetus for this work again? Oh, that's right. We were bleeding talent. Talent were leaving the organization. So what we did was we took a look at their org data and all of the reports that we could pull, all the data that we could mine, and we said, did you know that the population that's leaving your organization by and large is the Naya persona? And by understanding that that's who we needed to target, we then could work backwards and say, yes, the group needs are important, but let's create targeted solutions that affect the experience of Naya, because we want to staunch the bleeding of that talent. That was the impetus for the work. And we needed the data to know that. Without the data, we would have been designing blind. We would have been making meaningful solutions, but we might not have been addressing the problem that, again, was the impetus for this work. This is a great place to kind of pause in your process. You have a good understanding of your people, who they are, what they do, why they do what they do, what has been their experience during, those meaningful milestones through onboarding or through a promotion. It could be something as innocuous as trying to order lunch for a meeting, whatever it may be. But how do we know if we're designing towards the right thing? We have a bunch of designers. We have a big team. We're all working on things. How do we know if we're working in concert and working towards the right thing? What you're looking at is an example of a vision map. They can take many different forms. They can be comprised of many different things. But this is one that we recently have done for a client related to onboarding. And what you'll see on here is we have a vision statement. What do we want the future to look like? We have a promise to our employees, something that we can say to them, this is what we want onboarding to look and feel like for you. We have principles of transformation. This is showing where we are today and where we want to go as an organization. And that's really important. But we can't do this unless we've already sat down with the organization and understood a little bit better about where they are. In traditional consulting, we call this discovery, right? In design thinking, we call it empathizing, but it's still discovery. We're having conversations, learning more about the organization. Within the middle here is saying, okay, if we know where we want to go, what does that actually look and feel like? How do we make it a little bit more tangible? And at the bottom, we have measures. And that's a huge miss. And I guess I can imagine you've been talking about this. If you've been in other sessions today, you've been talking about this pretty consistently. If you can't measure the experience, you can't manage the experience. And really more importantly, you can't mature the experience. You don't know what to do. And so with this client, we helped them identify 3 areas that they should focus on from a measurement perspective. We want them to measure the emotional components of the experience, the behavioral components of the experience, and then the technical components of the experience. And by teaming those 3 measurements together, we start to understand how we as an organization can act differently. Let's just think about the talent acquisition lifecycle. An employee submits an application. We get that application back. We say, hey, we'll connect with you within 24 hours. And we don't. We connect with them 72 hours later. Well, on the surface, we would say, well, we've missed our SLA. That's a bad experience. Well, maybe that's measuring a behavioral component from our talent acquisition team. Maybe that's measuring the technical side of the house from what the ATS is doing. But did we ask the candidate if that was a good or bad experience? What if they say, no, it's not a big deal? Well, then maybe we have an opportunity to change our SLA. Maybe we just tell people we'll connect with you within 72 hours. And now we've built a little bit more capacity back into our TA team. Being able to measure allows us to know if what we're doing makes a difference with experience. It allows us, really from like a scientific perspective, to do hypotheses. If I change this, then I would expect to see that. You can now measure and understand a little bit better of what you need to do. And so those measures are extremely important if you want to continue to mature the experience. So then let's jump into innovate. So we've gone through empathize, knowing about our people. We've talked about define. So what are their problems? Not how we solve for them, but what do they need? What are we actually trying to deliver? What are the outcomes? Within there is alignment, and we do drive alignment through this entire graph, but alignment sits up in that, empathize and define framework, and that's our vision now. So then let's jump into innovate. Really simply, again, to try to keep this tactical, we have 3 things we're doing from an innovation perspective. We're doing ideation, prototyping, and testing. I know it looks a little weird. We have ideation, prototyping, and testing. And ideation is all about the creativity that comes with design thinking, the fun. This is the fun part where you get to actually sit back and say, well, let's think about, what if we didn't work here at Acme? How could we solve this? What if money wasn't an issue, which it is, but if it wasn't, how might we solve this? What if resourcing, capabilities, capacity, what if those weren't an issue? How would we solve it? Prototyping is saying, you had a great idea. What would it actually look like? If we're prototyping a thing, you can build it. If you're prototyping an experience or an event, sometimes we say, hey, we really need to have like a welcome video. How do you prototype a welcome video? Well, be creative. Get on a Zoom call with yourself and record what it could look like. Record your voice into your phone, storyboard it on a piece of paper, whatever it may be. The key with prototyping is doing it quick and dirty. Don't spend a lot of time. The more time you spend on prototyping, the more married you get to that design. And then if you go into number 3 here and test with your customers and they say, not interested, it can be kind of a heart-wrenching experience. I can tell you from experience. It's not always fun. So prototyping should be quick. Testing, like I just mentioned, very rarely happens in the way that I'd like to see it happen. Sure, we do regression testing or unit testing or UAT, which is user acceptance testing, to make sure like, okay, does the light switch actually work? Sure it does. Great, let's launch it. When I talk about testing, it reminds me when I was a kid, so I grew up here in Minneapolis and General Mills is down the street. I remember somehow, this is before email, but my mom was able to sign up for taste testing. And so as a 5-year-old, I got to go to the University of Minnesota and test fruit snacks. Someone had an idea for a new fruit snack. They prototyped it, create a small batch of these things. We got, as kids, got to go in and test it. My mom got to, test it too. Is this something you'd give your kids? And then General Mills knew, should we make 10 million of these things or should we not? When I talk about testing, it is the experience, not if the fruit snack is edible. That's important, but that's table stakes. What does it look like? Where, like if it's a light switch, where's the light switch located? Is it a dimmer switch or is it a toggle? Is it in the back of the room or is it in the front of the room? That's what we're thinking about from testing. So now that we've ideated and prototyped and tested, we can now move into deliver. And in the traditional design thinking model, this wasn't always captured. So when we think about delivery, we think about 3 things now. You can see actually this only had 2. We want to do 3 things. We want to help with deployment, and that's the planning and phasing of this delivered value. We want to measure, are we actually delivering the experience that we want? And you can see I have these Harry Potter lightning bolts floating around here. Mature. Are we consistently and continuously improving this? And the reason I added this in is, yes, it was part of the Leapgen design model of ROI, run, optimize, innovate. But we've been working really closely with clients on how to create a sustainable model that we can infuse into their agile frameworks that a lot of HR teams are adopting, or their safe agile frameworks, which is scale agile framework, or scale agile framework. I can't remember what the E is, and that model. And so we try to embed this so that, again, they can continuously improve their process, but it's data driven. Because without number 2, you can't do number 3. You cannot mature your experience without the measurement. So we've covered the model, and I'm just going to backtrack here. This is casual enough with you all, and if you have questions, fire them at me. But we've talked about learn. We've talked about innovate. We've talked about deliver, really at a high level. So, like, what can you do to get this started? Well, today I want you just to reflect on, honestly, what you heard through all of the sessions. Think about how we use data to inform experience. Think about how we define experience. In the next couple of days, I want you to think about the initiatives that are going on in your organization. Are we aligned? Do we have a clear vision for what we want? Have we defined experience as an organization, or does everybody think of it differently? And then next week, I would love to get in contact with you, however formal or informal, even if it's just sending me an email and saying, hey, Ryan, can you send me some more examples of a persona? Or can we chat about how to approach a design thinking initiative? Whatever it may be, I'd love to just connect and hear from you. So again, hopefully through the session, you were able to learn a little bit more about design thinking and, again, maybe the nuanced steps of the Leapgen methodology. Hopefully this was exciting. I'm overtly passionate about this work. So hopefully some of that has rubbed off on you. And then really, it's about mindset. I want you to change the mindset. We should be driving empathetic decisions and intentional design because great experiences don't happen by accident. But bad ones do. Bad ones will happen by accident if you're not paying attention to it. I do have some stuff for you all. And again, we're going to stay on the line. Al's going to come back on in a second. But get your phones out. Feel free to take a picture of this QR code. This is easier said than done. So I wanted to give you stuff to make it easier to be doing this stuff. So not just design thinking, but design doing. And so we have some free sort of takeaways that you can use. And a lot of our content is free because education is the only way that will elevate the HR space. But we have a capabilities versus capacity model that just plot yourself or your team on here. And there's some tips and tricks as to, what are your next steps. We have a high level little handout about the design thinking process and methodology. And then there's a fun, I guess I'm a nerd. It's a fun little worksheet that you can do with your team that walks you through empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and gives you a little bit for reflection. But with that, what I'll do is I'll stop sharing my screen. Al, if you want to swing back on, I'm happy to answer some questions, or we can just kind of hang out and chat.
I'm right here. Man, that was cool. So let me. I got a handful of questions to spark things off. And by the way, if somebody wants to put a question in the feed, you're welcome to do so, or the Q&A section, or you can even raise your hand and we can call on you and you can make yourself visible if you so choose and ask the question yourself. So feel free to do any one of those things. But for now, I just want to kind of summarize a little bit of what I have heard throughout the course of the day and also celebrate and emphasize some of the points that you brought up. And one thing that I want to just call out from the get-go is this idea of personas and how you prioritize personas. Because if we talk about everything from diversity groups to hiring cohorts to job families, and then something that is as important to me as anything is the knowledge that some of us have young families, you being a perfect example. I know Jess has a young family as well. So it's like, how can we understand the real life experiences that people are going through so we can craft a work experience that accommodates the realities of their day-to-day life, and that we just don't assume that they're going to be heads down and fully focused 8 hours each day. So can you speak to, again, how you identify personas and then how you craft experiences specific to those personas?
Yes, I can. And I'm going to infuse Justin's question too about how do we avoid becoming too generic, and conversely, how do we avoid becoming too granular? So personas, just as a quick recap, because I don't know if I went too deep into it. A persona, like I showed up on the screen earlier, it's this character, and it's both fictional and non-fictional. There was no one Naya at that organization, but there was many Nayas. Personas represent not just common denominator thoughts and feelings, but it's what we consider like behavioral archetypes, these things that are reoccurring within the organization that are really palatable. Like we should read Naya and say, oh, I know someone like her. Like if we don't say that, we've missed something with the persona. Personas are interesting though, because organizations ask me all the time, like, well, how many do we need? How many should we have?
Right.
It can really depend on the initiative. So, when we were thinking about career growth and development, we did interviews and we only found 3 for people that were interested in developing themselves. For broader overarching experience, depending on the size, it could be 3, it could be 5, it could be 7. With personas, less is more. And a persona does not equal a customer segment. Within any organization, you could have a ton of different jobs, responsibilities, level of tenure, and those could be customer segments, still consumers. But what really the power of that persona is, where are they similar? And so, Justin, to your point, it's really having a good understanding of what you're trying to answer. Because if you don't know clearly what you're trying to answer, you'll ask too many questions and you won't have anything that's really actionable. You'll have good FYI, like, here's some great information. Again, like I mentioned, knowing what you want to answer and your initiative will also help drive the level of granularity. The more granular you get, the more specific your solutions will be. But we don't want to end up, and this might, I guess, maybe dating myself, but we used to always collect baseball cards and you could get like tops, and it was every baseball player and they had all of their stats. Like, what, as an organization, if you're not in a position to do anything with that information, your time is better spent saying, well, let's maybe look at it by team instead of by individual player. Or maybe let's look at all the pitchers and all the catchers versus every individual person. So know what you want to ask or know what you want to answer, and then that shapes your questions, and that helps give you insight as to what lens your personas will take.
Taking off this idea of identifying personas and prioritizing them and so forth, who is actually involved in an employee experience initiative is a constant question that I field and explore. We're in this place, particularly in response to COVID, where we have facilities and IT and HR, legal, and others collaborating like never before. That creates this great opportunity to design not only the future of work, but the workplace, the environment. And so oftentimes personas comes up in those discussions. So in terms of who should be identifying these personas, prioritizing their experiences, going through the process that you laid out, who would you recommend be in the room, albeit a Zoom room or whatever these days?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts there?
It's a good question. It's interesting. When I first started doing this work, HR was viewed as the owner of experience, and that's actually shifted. Mm-hmm. It's now like the steward or the shepherd of experience, though it is everybody's responsibility. It is legitimately everybody in the organization's responsibility to deliver experience, from the frontline employee to the manager to the senior executive and the E-suite, all of that jazz. When we think about design initiatives, who should be on the team, having a really nice cross-functional group of individuals who are passionate, because that's the key. You could have the right positions in the room, but if they're not the right people,
right,
like not interested in experience or being empathetic, then it's all for naught. And so we've been working with a lot of our, I was going to say friends, I guess they're friends, but clients, with creating these experience coalitions. It's a group of, not even like-minded, because diversity of thought is important, but folks that have a lot of very similar core values as it relates to how they want to treat their employees. And it's across IT, facilities, HR, the other business sectors, should there be some. Because I always say HR, and actually I don't say this, I have a colleague, Alex Z, who's smarter than I, more wise, and she said, HR is going to be replaced by HR, so human resources gets replaced by human resourcefulness. If human resources doesn't help shepherd this, these other functions are going to start solving their experience problems. And that's why I get called in and I'm working with clients that have 3 LMSs.
Yeah.
Oops.
Yeah.
So cross-functional is key. Looking for people who are passionate is even more important. We've seen, these reports. It doesn't have to do so much with industry experience as having the right skills.
Yeah.
Have the people that have the right skills and passions around the table, because that's how you move the work forward.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask a question that's seemingly self-serving to you, but I mean it sincerely on behalf of everyone who's listening here today and potentially after the fact, is that I've seen many organizations try and do employee experience as kind of a project that is someone's part-time job. Then it never gets done, and at least done well. And now there are people who are actually getting hired to, okay, you're in charge of employee experience, and they're under-resourced and they're trying to influence and get things done, and it's difficult. And then there are still those maybe leading practice companies that have redefined their HR function as employee experience or employee success, and they've gone all in, and maybe they've applied ample resources. But for most organizations, they haven't. And so I see a significant role for a facilitator of the project, a project manager, someone to usher this coalition to where they are now, to a destination, have a process, have, some leading practices, some, guiding questions, whatever it is, and work towards deliverables, work towards personas, work towards experiences. So can you just share that? And again, I acknowledge that as seemingly self-serving, but
Yeah.
if somebody doesn't come in and, take charge and steward it, then it's just not going to get done. So can you speak to that a bit?
For sure. I'm a strong believer that Leapgen can help any organization. I am also a strong believer that the way that help manifests itself looks completely different depending on the organization, from those that have no capabilities related to design and very little capacity and really just need someone to come in and, we need help getting our car out of the ditch, compared to those that have high capabilities and rather high capacity that just want a friend to chat to, like, can you review this?
Right.
And so, when we talk about those stewards from a Leapgen perspective, those are our design coaches. And so those are the brilliant people that I work with that work with our clients. Again, maybe just meeting with them every week to say, okay, let's get the design coalition or the experience coalition together. Have we actually addressed these issues? If so, great. What are the outputs? How do we measure? And if not, what do we need to do to change that?
Mm-hmm.
The key with all of it is just asking for help. I mean, I'll be honest, if there's an opportunity for us to help you, I would love to do that, you being whomever is listening. But if you have things set and it just makes sense for us to reconnect in 6 months and see how things are going, I'm happy to make a friend. So, yeah.
Well, let me ask this, because you all have, as a firm, have built your brand around employee experience, digital transformation, workforce transformation. And when we talk about digital transformation specifically, IT in most organizations is the driver of that, and HR is along for the ride. And sometimes they might push a certain tool or process improvement or what have you. That said, if we're really talking about the future of work or now of work, it is the case where IT has a significant role to play, as do facilities, we talked about in formerly. There's also increasingly, at least this is my observation, that there are governance bodies, if not individuals, that are focused on the future of work, that are really looking at disruptive technologies, location strategies, all these things. And HR sometimes is in the conversation, sometimes they're not. So my point of question to you is, are you seeing HR leading employee experience and digital transformation? Do you see other functions within organizations leading this initiative? And in a year or two's time, do you think it's going to be 50% non-HR and 50% HR? Where do you see the trend is, I guess, the point of question.
Love the question. HR is leading the conversations if they've taken the time to develop the skills to lead the conversation, because there's almost this artificial bifurcation between IT and HR. There's the technology people and the people.
Right.
And that's how that's why we have those two functions. What I'm starting to see is sort of the dissolution of just traditional IT and traditional HR, and we have people services or digital experience teams, because HR people are becoming technologists. And I've worked with so many IT people that are truly driven by empathetic design. Mm-hmm. And so again, if you're in an HR function that has very legacy HR skills, when I say legacy HR skills, more of that sympathetic rather than empathetic, focused on old process rather than automation, digitization, you probably will be in a passenger seat or a back seat of the car driving towards experience. Right. If you take the time to practice those driving skills, that's how you switch from the passenger seat to the driver's seat. But again, my prediction would be, and we've already started to see this, you'll have people service functions. Mm-hmm. Rather than just traditional IT that are working on, servers and data security and data privacy. Why do we have two call centers? Why do we have a call center that's handling if someone's having locked out of, Microsoft versus locked out of Workday? And with Viva, that's going to consistently drive the fact that, well, Office 365 was owned by IT, but the experience layer, that was owned by HR. And so either, we're going to have some fights break out, or we're going to have some amazing music being played because they're going to be working in concert.
Yeah, and that music isn't going to happen by accident. There's going to have to be a conscious effort to align those people and their thinking and models. Let me ask this: as you undoubtedly know, many organizations, particularly tech companies here in the Bay Area where I'm based, are making formal announcements around their return to work policy. Salesforce, like 1 to 3 days a week. I know of a firm that's going back to 4 days a week, and there's a bit of an uproar about that. And there's, I believe, Google's 3 days a week, and there's some variability given the size of the organization and your job family of how that would apply. But at the end of it, this is going to affect the experience of people, day to day, their commute, where they live, and all that. So, are you involved in those conversations as well? And I have seen many HR organizations be laggards, for reasons that you've already cited. But if we're not, as HR professionals, in those conversations, then we're going to be dictated to, and there's going to be some misses. And we have a lot of insight that maybe facilities and others don't have. So you know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
Can and do we need to be involved in return to workplace policymaking, as well as what we do in terms of learning how people are responding to those policies over time?
100%. And the reason being, a lot of the return to work is based off of somebody's want to have something feel like it used to. I've worked with a lot of executives that say, well, we want people back in here because they're not working. I'm like, well, how do you know that? Well, I just know this. Well, you just feel it. I don't know if you know it. Like, just to how we've been talking today, feelings and knowledge are different. Feelings usually are visceral. They are. Knowledge is data driven. So HR needs to be in that conversation, because I'm not in a place to say what is the right model. Everybody is different. I know from my experience, just with some of the work that I've done in the IO Psych practice, it's not everybody is functioning at their best working from home, or working from wherever is probably a better expression. Some people operate better when they are working next to somebody, or in an office, or feel like they have a supervisor who's sitting next to them. I think the reason HR needs to be in that conversation, because it is, again, it's kind of arbitrary. It's either all in the office or not in the office, or hybrid, but I don't know where the data is coming from to make someone say why one way works for another. For somebody, it might be all in the office. For another employee, it might not be in the office. So to apply that organizational, I know it makes sense scalably. I think it does come down to, again, our people data. Like, do we know that actually works for Ryan versus for Al?
Right. I just had a big boost of empathy for you. I just had an image of Jess on one shoulder, Jason on the other shoulder, looking down at you, making sure you're doing your work. I got scared for it.
The same for me. Like, I miss that energy. So we've always been remote, and for me, one of the inherent values of working at Leapgen, or benefits for me, was when we got to travel and I got to hang out with Jason and Jess. Granted, now they're both in the Twin Cities here, but seeing my other colleagues working with clients. And so internally, I've had to kind of manage that. Like I'd love to have been in San Fran or in the Bay Area with you, hanging out, doing this live. But
well, someday soon, hopefully. Hey, I have a couple more questions. And I was going to ask you before, but I wanted to get to the return to workplace question. It's around technology, and technology companies within HR have guided the discussion for many years. You go back 20 plus years. Here is a process. Get our tool, and there you have a process. If you want a survey, here's the survey engine, and here's the questions. You just take it. Now, fast forward 20 years, and now we have a lot of customization that's enabled. Organizations, in my view, I've been jumping up and down. You have to formulate what you want, what experiences you want to deliver, and go select technologies that are going to be able to deliver those experiences. I still believe that to be true, maybe even more so than ever before. That being said, there are a host of technologies that are squarely, via their marketing, in the employee experience space. Obviously, Viva, Microsoft, with Glint, you go Medallia, Qualtrics, Perceptix, on down the line. I'm going to miss somebody and piss somebody off, so I should go back to my list. But you get the idea. So I am concerned, but also hopeful that we have a kind of process-centric approach that thinks about the experiences we want to create and then go shopping, as opposed to, hey, let's just get this and hope it works. What approach do you take with technology selection? I was going to say ServiceNow as well. That was one I was missing.
Yeah, and they're all great, by the way, and they're great if you know what sort of experience you want to deliver. And so the days of the RFP are kind of dead. I mean, they still exist. Leapgen responds to RFPs, that they're formal. From a technology perspective, it's going down a checklist of functional and technical requirements. We're in the era of RFE. It is, request for experience. I've done my design thinking work. I know my personas. I know my vision. I know what I want to achieve. And this is work that we've done very recently. Then we create a bunch of scenarios and user stories, very similar to the agile process. But when we send out this RFP, it's not this check the box. Yes, there are check the box things that need to happen for an RFP. But when vendors sit down, I don't need them to go through the checklist and tell me all their functionality, because I could see it in their commercials. What I want them to do is assume the role of one of the personas I've provided them with and walk me through that experience. Because a lot of the vendors that you mentioned, they're all great and they all have the right ingredients. I want to tell them what I want them to make, because having salt, sugar, and flour, that's great. And a lot of them have that. But if I don't tell them the right amounts and in what order, I don't know what I end up with at the end of the day. And so that's when you end up with that experience by accident or by default. But
yeah. And that actually leads into probably my final question. And we have, let's say, great technology. And, let's say we're starting to learn what's going on with people. Therefore, we can respond more appropriately. And let's assume that, we do that. There has to be a North Star. And if you go back to your design thinking process, it starts with empathize. And so there is a constant tension, and this is something that I believe we all have to accept and acknowledge and deal with, that we're striving for productivity, output on the individual level and team level and organizational level. However, we also have to balance that with well-being and how people feel about their job. So, it's one thing to resource them and say, be productive, get things done. It's another thing to say, hey, you are really stressed and burnt out. You got 2 kids running behind you. Your workload is too much. And so arguably there's an ethical responsibility to adjust. And I frankly don't know culturally, and this could be societally, not only organizationally, that we have the willingness to touch the gauge to slow down the pace of work in some cases, and maybe right-size the workforce with an additional hire to decrease the workload of a working mother or parent or someone who's taking care of an elder parent or something like that. So can you speak to that, North Star, and the fact that, many organizations maybe not have flexed that muscle collectively and culturally?
Yeah.
Thoughts there?
Yeah, the North Star is always going to be, if you remember, I flashed up that vision map, and there's the vision for what we want experience to look like. There's the promise to our people, and that promise. So the vision is what we want the future to look like. The promise is the outcome. Like, what is the result of that vision? That promise needs to be our guiding star, where we think about, are we putting our people first?
Right.
Because it's palpable. Everybody. I do listening sessions with focus groups with frontline employees every day, every day, and people. And I've been curious. Are you working more or less than you did like a year ago? And now we're actually almost to the year mark with COVID, so I'll have to say 18 months.
Yeah.
People are working more, and so we have to be very cognizant of when we infuse technology into the way that we work. Technology does a great job of infusing artificial urgency. Oh, my Slack went off when we're chatting. Hold on a second. Let me check it. Oh, I need to get something done. I know that there are urgent matters that need to be attended to, but I also know that there are not urgent matters that feel urgent. And so by using data and really just being thoughtful with our promise to our people, understanding and setting boundaries to say, how do we identify what truly is urgent? And, you worked all weekend on it, but we didn't need it till Wednesday.
Yeah.
Like, how do we balance that? But again, at the end of the day, it is it all goes back to being able to actually listen to our people. Like, and when I say listening, I know we've had a few sessions about that today. I think of listening as hearing, so getting the feedback and then doing something with it.
Got it. Got it. Gosh, Ryan, I talked to you all afternoon about this, and more importantly, I can see immediately how you and Leapgen as a firm could add immense value. So I'm so glad that you responded and were able to share today. As we start to wrap up, how can people learn more about you and Leapgen?
Yeah, that QR code, we'll figure out how to share our information. Leapgen.
I did it.
Thank you. Perfect. Yeah, and I feel like I'm a smart dude, but man, I work with a lot of very, very awesome people. So, even if you go to our website, take a look and connect with some of us on LinkedIn. We're always open to make a new connection, to make a new friend, and just have a conversation.
All right, Ryan. Well, thanks for being you. Stay warm up there, and we'll hopefully talk and see each other soon.
Yeah, likewise. Talk to you later.
All right, be well. Bye.
Yep, you as well. Bye-bye.